Well, good evening, everyone. Everyone so far. I'm guessing people will continue signing on for a bit. But since we're being live streamed, I'd like to start more or less on time. So as people are signing on, I invite you to get comfortable. Find a posture that is both supportive and allows you to relax. And in the traditional teachings, there's at least 4 of those postures: sitting, lying down, walking, or standing. So even at Sangha, if you find yourself sleepy or uncomfortable in your seat, feel free to stand up, even during meditation. That's a accepted meditation posture. And for most of us, it's finding a seat that, as I said, allows us to be both relaxed and alert. It's a careful balance of meditation. But the relaxed part is important, because a relaxed body lends itself to a relaxed mind. So do whatever you need to do to wiggle around a bit or take a couple of deep breaths and settle your body into its seat. And relax. Softening the forehead, the face, the jaw, letting your shoulders drop. Allow yourself to sink into your seat. And if you're comfortable letting your eyes gently close during meditation, I invite you to do that. If you don't like to meditate with your eyes closed, I just advise that you don't look at the screen. There's too many distractions on the screen. One of the things we know about the various sense doors is that the sense door of the eyes tend to trigger the mind, trigger the thinking mind, more than any of the other sense doors. So often, by gently closing the eyes, closing that particular sense door, we'll become aware of the other sense doors opening up. Sense door of hearing, sense door of touch, of feeling. And even perhaps, if you just had a snack, the sense door of taste or smell. But certainly hearing becomes more predominant when we close our eyes. Right now you may be aware of the sound of my voice, but also any sounds in the background. The room you're in, the building you're in, perhaps even sounds coming from outside. Sounds only happen in the present moment. So they're useful meditation objects. But actually, anything you're aware of can be considered a meditation object. Thoughts can be a meditation object. Sense of touch. Perhaps you're aware of the weight of your body on your seat, maybe at the sits bones or the touch of your back against a chair, your feet on the floor, your hands touching wherever they're touching. Sense of touch, of feeling, only happens in the present moment. So if you're aware of the sense of touch right now, you're present. If you're aware of sounds happening in the moment, you're in the present moment. And breathe. Breathing is itself a subtle sense of touch. We feel the passage of air through our nostrils, sinuses. We perhaps feel the subtle sense of the chest rising. That's a feeling. That's touch. The belly rising and contracting. All happening in the present moment. In the Buddha's fundamental teachings on meditation, mindfulness of the body is the first foundation of mindfulness. So anything having to do with our sense doors, with our body, is a suitable meditation object. We simply notice sounds as being sounds. We don't have to label them, recognize them, give them a name. We don't have to think of what's that truck doing driving by outside. It's just noise meeting the sense door of the ear. That's direct experience. And as we gently settle, allow the mind, invite the mind to settle gently into the body, just as the body is settled in its seat. Bringing body and mind together. We may notice thoughts arise and pass away uninvited, just like sounds meet our ear. And we can meet them in the same way. Thoughts. We don't have to follow them. We don't have to feed them. Thoughts come and go just like sounds come and go. Just like the breath comes and goes. Everything changing. And yet that change itself is a kind of constancy. So the mind with its thoughts and its feelings is like a great river passing by. Maybe there's a lot going on in that river. But from our perspective, it just flows. It's a unity. No need to go fishing. We just observe. Coming to rest in the peace and ease that is the natural peace and ease. Body, mind. So whether you choose in your meditation to have a narrow focus on something like the breath, whether you prefer to open up your awareness to whatever's happening in the present moment, any of the sense doors, continue practicing in the way that is most comfortable for you. And I'll ring a bell at the end. If the mind has wandered, got caught up in a story, it's no problem. With mindfulness, we'll notice that that's happened. We can gently bring our attention back to the breath or to the body or even sounds, grounding ourselves once again in the present moment and starting all over again. So, for those of you that don't know me, I'm David Lewis. I have led Mission Dharma before, and I'm a fan of Howie's and a student of Howie's. And as always, I'm very happy to be here with you. This evening, I would like to talk about metta. And metta is not I haven't given a lot of talks about metta, despite the fact I've been giving talks for quite a long time now. So I'm kind of coming out of the closet and confessing that in all my years of practice, I've often had a fraught relationship with metta. I've gone on metta retreats. I've incorporated metta into my practice on Vipassana retreats. And I've developed my own set of metta phrases to use in daily life and in my own meditation. So I know how to do metta. But the practice has never quite felt as natural or comfortable to me as I would have liked it to. The problem was I had ideas about metta, about what metta or loving kindness meant in my own estimation. I seldom felt like I was fulfilling them skillfully. So in short, for the longest time, I judged myself for not being very good at metta, until recently, anyway. But I'll get to that in a few minutes. For those of you that might not know what metta is, it's a Pali word. Metta is a Pali word. Pali is the language of the Buddha's time. It's the Pali word most commonly defined as loving kindness. The eminent Pali translator, Analayo, prefers to translate it as benevolence. And the English word benevolence comes from the Latin bene, which is good, and volens, which is will. So goodwill also works. And that's my preferred translation. Goodwill seems to me to be a lot more accessible than loving kindness, especially when we're trying to have metta for someone that's might be difficult in our lives. Metta is the foundation for the other three Brahma Viharas, or sublime states. We cannot cultivate compassion, which is another one of the Brahma Viharas. We cannot cultivate compassion if we don't first have goodwill for ourselves and for other beings. Likewise with joy and equanimity. They're all grounded in goodwill. Metta is also included in the list of the 10 paramis, or the 10 perfections, which are the 10 ennobling personal qualities. The Pali commentators define metta as the strong wish for the welfare and happiness of others. Essentially, metta is an altruistic attitude of love and friendliness, as distinguished from the mere amiability based on self-interest. Metta is fundamental to all aspects of Dharma practice, from mindfulness to samadhi to emptiness. Philip Moffat states that the purpose of loving kindness and compassion practices is to cultivate the intention to embrace all parts of yourself and to overcome feelings of separation from yourself and others. Thus, you may learn to receive and work with your faults as sources of needless suffering and spontaneously move towards change in order to relieve that suffering. So what he's saying is metta is a tool for relieving suffering. This is a wonderful goal, but in retrospect, I can now see that one of my faults that has led to needless suffering was that I failed to embrace all parts of myself. I needed to fully accept and clearly see my aversive, judgmental, and fearful side. I've always known that of the three Buddhist personality types, I am an aversive type. But for many years, I made the mistake of thinking that I needed to change that and stop feeling anger somehow and stop being judgmental of myself and others. In other words, I thought that I needed to do something in order to be somebody else. And I, of course, generally failed at this. Striving or efforting for some outcome is seldom a helpful practice on this path. Ajahn Sucitto, who's an English monastic, who's known for his big heart and loving demeanor, Ajahn Sucitto once said that there are times when my kindness amounts to just not holding on to the negative impression that I have of someone, including myself. That quote, when I first ran across it, was the beginning of forming a different understanding of metta for me. It was liberating to know that I didn't have to be perfect, nor did I have to even be particularly loving or kind all the time. I just had to be able to recognize and be willing to let go of my negative impressions whenever I'm able. So yet another translation of metta might be non-aversion. Gil Fronsdal reminds us that metta practice does not involve either positive thinking or the imposition of an artificial positive attitude. There's no need to feel loving or kind during metta practice. Rather, we meditate on our good intentions, however weak or strong they may be, and water the seeds of these intentions. When we water the wholesome intentions instead of expressing unwholesome ones, we develop these wholesome tendencies within us. So, like mindfulness practice in general, metta involves accepting ourselves just as we are, with nothing left out. This doesn't mean that we don't need to change anything, but rather that acceptance precedes change. In order to grow, we first have to accept ourselves and recognize what changes we might want to make in order to decondition suffering and cultivate happiness. And one of those changes might be practicing acceptance of things just as they are. What a radical notion that is. And of course, this applies to other people as well. Wishing that other people would be different than they are just generates dukkha for ourselves. Judging others has no effect on them, except perhaps to alienate them. It only causes suffering for us. Learning to accept others just as they are is liberating and opens the door to compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. This goes not only for our friends, our neighbors, our loved ones, but also people that we read about in the news, people we run into on the street. The world of late, but really always, is full of people who are undertaking unskillful Unskillful is a less judgmental word than bad, wrong, or stupid. People who are undertaking unskillful actions, actions that cause harm. We can condemn the actions, but refrain from hating the people. Because like us, if they are not mindful, they are susceptible to the universal forces of greed, aversion, and delusion. Pretty much all the news is a perpetual litany of greed, aversion, and delusion from a dharmic point of view. You may have noticed this. That's why it's so painful. But I find it useful to view it in that context. It may be easier to see those forces at work in others than seeing them operating in ourselves. When we practice mindfulness, we learn to recognize the discomfort caused by our own craving, fear, anger, and confusion. And in doing so, we may be moved to let go of those habits of mind. And just as we can learn to become more compassionate with ourselves, we can learn to become more compassionate with others. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow said, "If we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each man's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility." Well, maybe not all hostility, but at least some of it. Hopefully we can condemn people's actions while still having compassion for the people. One of the things that I notice about people who cause harm to others is that they never seem to be authentically happy. That's not a judgment, but an observation, and perhaps I'm wrong about it. In the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the Buddha's famous discourse about the four foundations of mindfulness, he invites us to see phenomena both internally and externally. And this is generally interpreted as meaning that we can learn and grow by both being mindful of our own patterns of thought and behavior, but also by recognizing those in others. And indeed, I often notice that what triggers me in other people is sometimes what I most avoid looking at in myself. We're all in the same boat. The early Greek philosopher Philo of Alexander admonishes us to be kind, because everyone you meet is engaged in a great struggle. Or, as our own James Baldwin put it, when he said, "I imagine that one of the reasons that people cling to their hate and prejudice so stubbornly is because they sense that once the hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their own pain." I think the Buddha would have agreed that we must deal with our own pain in order to avoid hate. So I'm venturing into the territory of compassion now, but it's not always easy to separate compassion from metta. And that's because they're connected. As I said earlier, metta is the foundation of compassion and the other sublime states. They're all connected. Karen Armstrong observes that compassion asks us to look into our own hearts, discover what gives us pain, and then refuse, under any circumstances whatsoever, to inflict that pain on anyone else. So this brings it back to metta. We want to cultivate goodwill because we want to do no harm, neither to ourselves nor to others. Metta is the antidote for aversion. Aversion includes not only hatred and ill will, but also fear, anxiety, intolerance, resentment, and cruelty, to name just a few of its manifestations. The Buddha originally taught metta to the monastic community as an antidote to fear. He encouraged the early monastics to go out into the forest and find a remote place to practice. But a good many of them came back to him and reported that they were having a hard time practicing because of their fears of tigers and snakes during the day and bad spirits at night. So the Buddha taught metta as a practice to dissipate fear. Now, in the legend, the monks reported that when they practiced metta, the snakes and devas stopped bothering them. But I'm guessing that actually it was probably their fearful minds that stopped bothering them. That's what metta will do. So it's still a good Dharma lesson. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm an aversive type of personality. One of my struggles with metta was trying to be more kind and loving without really giving up my aversive habits of mind, like judgment and fear. You can't embody metta and aversion at the same time. It took me years of mindfulness practice to really acknowledge my unskillful patterns of mind. By unskillful, I mean those patterns that cause suffering. Turning away from them, denying them, and striving to be different wasn't really working for me. So I had to accept and deeply feel into those unskillful habits. And when I felt the suffering that they caused, they sort of just naturally dissipated. I didn't have to do anything. None of us consciously and willingly beats our head against the wall. If we're not crazy, once we become aware that it hurts, we'll stop. So mindfulness is the answer. Simply striving to be more loving and accepting didn't work for me. I had to first recognize what stewing and aversion felt like. Once I learned how to do that and gradually let go, or sometimes just let be, metta naturally arose all by itself. As U Tejaniya reminds us, meditation is cultivating the good qualities of mind. It's making conditions right so good qualities can arise. Samadhi, or cultivating a still mind, was also enormously helpful to me. When the mind is relatively quiet, whatever thoughts that arise are generally magnified. Any of you that have been on a silent meditation retreat know this phenomenon. It's a little unsettling until you get used to it. But it's in the space of a still mind that we really feel the pain of suffering and the joys of metta, compassion, and equanimity. We feel everything more strongly. As U Tejaniya said in that quote, this is how we cultivate good qualities of mind. It's not about striving, but rather a gentle and persistent recognizing, accepting, and letting go. And then coming back and doing it again and again. what we're doing is rewiring deeply etched neural pathways. This is why we call it practice. We can understand all of this conceptually, but freedom requires us to experience it directly, to feel it deeply and intuitively, and let go completely. Like all good things, this kind of change takes time and practice and patience. And as I said, it starts with acceptance. I'm still an aversive type, but I'm not run by aversion as much as I used to. I no longer turn away from it, and I've befriended it. It's just a tendency. It doesn't control me. And when I can hold my disapproval and fear and anger lightly, there's space for metta, or goodwill, to arise. Very gradually over time, metta is replacing aversion in my experience, and I'm so grateful for that. I held on to my habitual patterns of mind for far too long, and they blocked metta. Needless to say, I find metta to be a much more pleasant place to abide in. I can recommend it. Ken MacLeod asks, what is freedom? And then answers, it's the moment-by-moment experience of not being run by one's own reactive mechanisms. But as Howie likes to say, we have to want to be free more than we want to perpetuate our habitual patterns of mind. We have to want to be free more than we want to perpetuate our habitual patterns of mind. This is not a small thing. It's a really important choice point. Are you willing to look at your suffering and let go of it, even if it's familiar and habitual? Are you willing to accept your shadow in order to let the light in? You may know the Leonard Cohen lyric, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So there are a lot of different ways to incorporate metta into your practice. There are the metta phrases, which are not original to the Buddha. A lot of people don't know. They're not original to the Buddha, but they were developed by monastics later as a kind of mantra to support metta. May I be safe. May you be healthy. May all beings be free of suffering. And so on. Metta phrases. Then there's the practice of infusing yourself with metta and then visualizing, radiating it out in all directions. This is what Analayo teaches. Radiating metta in all directions. These are both skillful practices, whatever works for you. One of the lovely things about Dharma practice is that there are plenty of options. If this doesn't work, try that. But what worked for me was just basic mindfulness and samadhi practices that we teach here every week. Just quieting the mind and watching what arises, noticing what thoughts lead to suffering and what thoughts lead to happiness. Then the choice becomes easy, because for most of us, peace and happiness is preferable. For sure, abiding in metta makes me peaceful and happy, while abiding in aversion and fear does not. And abiding in metta, I just want to say, does not prevent us from facing the problems of life in this troubled world. It's not a checkout. Many of the most admirable social activists of the past century, from the Dalai Lama to Martin Luther King, from Nelson Mandela to Mother Teresa, were fueled by metta, by kindness, by goodwill and love. That was behind their power. As the Buddha said, hatred never ends through hatred, but by love alone does it end. This is an ancient truth. So I should really end my talk with that wisdom from the Buddha, but I do want to briefly return to where I started and say that if some aspect of practice, whether it be metta or mindfulness or simply taking the time to meditate, if some aspect of practice is not working for you, don't judge yourself to be a bad Buddhist. There are many doors to the Dharma. If you stick with whatever is working for you, even if it's just showing up for Sangha once in a while, the rest will unfold with time. But trust your inner wisdom. Dharma teachers can point the way, and Sangha can support you. But waking up and fighting freedom comes from within, not from outside ourselves. Have faith in yourself, and you might discover that you're already free. So, thank you for your kind attention. And I'll be interested to hear what you have to say. If there's any questions or comments or anything come up for you as a result of that talk, Stephen, please. You're muted, Stephen.
I enjoyed your meditation a lot. You have a lot of depth and understanding about life. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay. So my question is, at times I have intrusive thoughts that almost border on taboo. And I know thoughts are clouds, they come and go, but some things kind of stick and they get kind of sticky. And I'd really like to let go of those sticky, uncomfortable thoughts. And I find that the more I'm trying to push them away, the more they want to stay. And so any suggestions on intrusive thoughts that border on taboo?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. And it fits with my talk. Two things. One is pushing them away, as I said in my talk, isn't really helpful. It just makes them more powerful. And the other thing is labeling them as taboo, meaning thoughts you don't want to have or you think that you shouldn't be having. That also gives them power. So I'd suggest just acknowledging that they're thoughts and that all thoughts are intrusive thoughts, just like all sounds that come to your ear are intrusive sounds. But we don't drive ourselves nuts thinking, I don't want to be hearing that. Well, we do if it's something that's really obnoxious. But thoughts coming in and meeting the mind consciousness are no different than sounds meeting ear consciousness. So rather than resisting them and fighting them and judging them as taboo and thinking, oh, I've got to stop doing this, just recognize them as passing phenomena. And one thing we know is that whatever arises goes away. So they'll go away all by themselves because that's the nature of phenomena. That's also true for feeling, for pain, for thoughts, for all other phenomena. So my advice is to give them less power, is to and to not resist so hard, and just kind of let them come and go. And that's a practice. I know that might sound harder than making it sound, but that's the practice. It's just letting phenomena arise and pass away. So is that helpful, Stephen?
Well, I don't think so because um, I know all that. I know there are clouds that come and go, but these are sticky ones, and they're difficult to just drop it, and they're sticky. So
So
uh,
don't drop it. Don't drop it. Notice how it feels in the body, and notice what happens when you don't resist them, when you don't fight back. Don't drop them.
yeah, I think it's a lot harder than it sounds for me. These sticky thoughts.
I hear you. Well, what you're talking about is attachment. You get attached to those thoughts. Even something that we want to get rid of. That's a form of attachment. Aversion is a form of attachment.
Yeah,
That's the second noble truth, and that's the cause of suffering. Attachment is a cause of suffering. So in practice, we just practice over and over again and letting go and just, or maybe in your case, maybe I shouldn't be using the phrase letting go. Maybe we should just be talking about letting be. Just let those thoughts be. Just say,
yeah,
oh, there's that. I bet they're repeats, aren't they?
yeah.
Yeah. No, my
I,
most
I,
obnoxious,
yeah,
intrusive thoughts are repeats.
yeah.
So, you see the same thing happening over and over again. It gets boring after a while.
It gets very obnoxious.
Yeah, it's obnoxious. So just let them be and see what happens, as opposed to resisting.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to throw them out the window.
Yeah, no, don't throw them the window. Just let them be.
Okay, I'll let them be.
One of the
Thank
biggest
you.
obstacles in meditation practice generally for all of us is wanting things to be other than they are. That's when we suffer. It's when we want things to be other than we want those thoughts to go away, or we want that pain to go away, and that just magnifies it.
Totally.
So just having a certain amount of acceptance. Um, Ajahn Chah said, "Invite them in for a cup of tea, but leave the door open. And they'll go off in their own way.
Okay. Thank you.
Practice with it. I know it's not so easy, but
No, it's not. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
sure, it's a great question. It's kind of the central Dharma question of all of it.
Uh, well, for me, it's been, yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anyone else? I really enjoy the wisdom of the Sangha. Questions, comments, reflections, maybe your experience with metta, if that's something you practice.
Just a quick comment. My name is Jeff. Am I on mute? Let me see. No, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
So I was at a retreat for Howie on Sunday, and I've known Howie from more of a distance for quite a few years from Spirit Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was just really charged up, and so I've known about your Tuesday nights, and I brought myself as a guest, and I'm really glad I did. Very good, very neat.
Oh, wonderful. Well, you're very welcome here. I'm sorry that it's not Howie this week, but he'll be here, I believe, next week.
Don't be sorry. It's a neat. This is really neat.
Yeah, I like that. Oh, I'm just always glad to have new faces. Sangha,
Yeah.
make new friends.
I'm jumping in because I'm the host and I don't think the host gets to raise their hand. um, I have a question about sort of how to cultivate metta. I've been on retreats where I used metta, and I find that phrases can start to feel kind of rote. Um, and I don't know if there's a moment when they typically turn into meaning or change your heart. There must be a better way than just repeating the phrases to replace aversion with metta, or to allow metta to overtake aversion. Or
Yeah, well, you have to be careful because that's what I just advised us all to do. Um, and at the same time, it's not particularly skillful to say I want to get rid of this and replace it with that, because that doesn't always work. So again, like I said with Stephen, sometimes it's better just to let it be. But yeah, the phrases can be rote. That was my first encounter with them. Also, I thought, oh, this is boring me, doing the phrases over and over and over again. But they do, and it has been my experience. They do over time. That boring, repetitive experience. They do start to cultivate. I found a sense of meta after a time. But the phrases don't work for everybody. And as I said, that's not original to the Buddha. So I don't know if you've ever encountered the Analios practice of what he says, what he suggests is that we cultivate metta maybe by thinking of somebody that we care about, a mentor or a loved one or a pet, and bringing them into our mind and bringing up the sense of metta and love for them, and then sending that out to all beings. And he's got a particular, I think even on YouTube, you can look up an audio and you can find metta instructions. But he says, send metta in front of you, send metta behind you, send metta to the sides, above and below. So that's just another practice that doesn't involve phrases. But as I said in the talk, what really worked for me was recognizing my aversion. And I'm talking about what you mentioned as metta as an antidote to aversion. Recognizing my aversion and kind of letting it be. I mean, the same way that I was suggesting to Stephen that he let intrusive thoughts be. Just letting my aversion, going, oh, there's my aversion again. And feeling it deeply, feeling, how does that feel in the body? It doesn't feel good. Aversion doesn't feel good. And when we recognize that something doesn't feel good, that is not benefiting us, we'll naturally let go. Sooner or later, we'll say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to bang my head against the wall. I'm going to stop doing that because it hurts. And all of a sudden, you find yourself in this place of non-aversion, which is metta. This place of non-aversion is metta. So what was really helpful for me was not to go with the classic definitions of metta and trying to generate loving kindness, but just kind of dealing with the hindrances in my own life, and then noticing what the absence of them felt like. And the absence of them is metta. It might not be the way you normally think about metta, but the absence of aversion is metta. So it might be simpler than you think. It might be doing less rather than doing more. Maybe not doing it all.
thank you.
You're welcome. Lisa, please.
I did. Thanks for your talk today. It was really nice. And kind of like what you were just describing, I realized I was feeling a lot of like aversion this week, like at work, and then I was sitting and like feeling like that tension in my body of like what aversion feels like. It feels very distinct in my chest. It's kind of like it blocks my throat.
Yeah.
And then behind that, which I often find, and then tears started to come to my face. They like roll down my cheeks like they are a little now. And I find that's often the case. So it was like a nice release. So thank you very much.
Well, you freed yourself. You just did the right thing. You just freed yourself, and that's why tears arise. That's
Yeah,
that's freedom, and that's a wonderful thing
yeah.
in Buddhism. So thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Uh, Stephen, do you have another question? You're muted.
I just needed to lower my hand.
Oh, okay. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
that. Well, we're kind of running short on time, so I imagine there's probably some announcements, Catherine, I would guess.
Yeah, just a couple. And I will put this in the chat. Howie has a retreat that is now waitlisted at Spirit Rock, Labor Day weekend, August 27th. Well, that's coming up this week, through September 1st. Actually, it starts tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
So I don't know if there's still a wait list, but I guess if you really want to be last minute about it, you can try. And the results of the Mission Dharma start time poll are in the weekly newsletter. But if you're interested, it looks like it kind of split down the middle, with half the poll answerers wanting to start earlier and half wanting to keep the same time. So Mission Dharma will try to split the difference for a trial period and start at 6:30 Pacific starting on October 7th. And that will be, reminded in the weekly newsletter and so on. And finally, thank you so much for any generosity you feel moved to give to support David, to support our Sangha. And I will put instructions for how you can do that in the chat as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And that time change doesn't start next week. It doesn't start till October. So
October 7th. Yeah.
we have a month to prep. Okay, so let's just take a moment and before we sign off and offer the merit of our practice and by using metaphrases. In the same way that we want more loving kindness and acceptance in our own lives for ourselves, that's the same thing we wish for all beings. May all beings be safe from danger and harm. May they be healthy in body and mind. May they live with peace and ease and be free of suffering, just as we wish to be free of suffering. May it be so. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your practice. Thanks for the great discussion. Very happy to see you this evening.
Thank you, David. Noemi.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
David.
Noemi.
Thanks, everyone.
David.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody.